Hey there, everybody in the FFBE Global Facebook group, and hello to everybody who sees this video on YouTube as well. Welcome to this week's episode of Ask an Old Mog, where I take a question or two from the Facebook Global group and try to answer it in a visual way to try and help people learn about game mechanics and try and figure out what to do for trials and things like that. They're going to help them understand what to do when something is challenging or difficult and you're not sure what to do. So that said, this week we do actually have a question that came from the Facebook group, so I'm excited about that. And let's go ahead and dig into that right now. So the question looks something like this. In regard to the Aphmau Silver Crown fights, I can't see any way to survive the turn 3 fixed attack. If you're not sure what this is an event that just came out this week, and it's in the Vortex. It's this one right here, Master of Puppets, Bringer of a Brighter Future. So if you go ahead and look at this and you click on the trial itself and the strategy Moogle, this is what we're talking about. Alexander, it uses a mixture of physical and magical attacks. It says to block physical attacks with cover, raise your light resistance, and Divine Judgment does high damage and dispels your party, so beware. Mitigation and HP restoration spells are a must. Okay, so damage mitigation, it's giving us a little hint there. HP restoration, so HP is important. Be prepared to debuff the boss. So yeah, there's lots of things we can do. But notice it just says mitigation. It doesn't really talk about what does that really mean. So I want to talk a little bit about what that means and where we can find out some more information about mitigation and what it does for us. So this comes from the mechanics page. The mechanics page is one of my favorite pages on the entire wiki just because it teaches you everything you want to know about the game. I'm going to put a link to the mechanics page into the description, as well as a link to the specific section for fixed damage and mitigations. So you're going to see that on the description. So if you're not sure about that, where to find it, look in the description for me right now. So the user in question is asking specifically about fixed damage. So the wiki section on fixed damage says it is affected by general mitigation and is modified by elemental resistance. Now that only comes into play if the fixed damage attack that the enemy does is an elemental based damage. So if it's like a fixed fire damage and you have fire resistance or fire immunity, you will not take that damage no matter what. But if it's non-elemental, which is often the ones that are really damaging and really threatening, elemental resistance doesn't really matter a whole lot. But general mitigation does. So obviously right there we need to know, okay, what is general mitigation? How does it work? What does it do? Where do we get it? Okay, we'll get there, I promise, okay? Now, fixed damage also, it ignores several things we really need to pay attention to. First and foremost, it ignores evasion. So if it's a physical attack, and you are hoping that you're just going to evade it, it's not going to evade it. It also does not proc a counter. So if you get hit with a bunch of fixed damage attacks and you're thinking, great, my counter unit will just counter all these and do a bunch of damage because we're countering, or recover a bunch of damage with Chow or something like that. It does not proc a counter. And it ignores physical and magic mitigation skills, buffs, and equipment. It ignores physical and magic resistances. It ignores physical and magic cover. And it ignores mirage. So there's really not a whole lot we can do. And that's why these fixed damage attacks, especially the non-elemental ones, are so threatening. But there are some good things that we can do to help us get general mitigation on our party. General mitigation. The best source of general mitigation in the game comes from new Neovisions units that have high skills or LBs that provide that buff. And I'm going to pop up an example of one of the best ones that comes from a free unit in the game, Runda. This is Runda's limit burst. His base limit burst, Runda Scan, at max level, does 80% general mitigation for 3 turns to all allies and 80% physical mitigation for 3 turns to all allies. It also fills the LB gauge, which is really nice. But look at his base, or his shift LB, 85% mitigation for both physical and general. And it fills the LB gauge, which is really, really nice. So 85% is going to really reduce the incoming damage. If you have Runda and you like Runda, and then you also know why Master Machinist Abigail is also really, really good, because hers is basically the same thing. except it just does magic mitigation instead of physical. It also does weapon imperils instead of LB gauge fill. So like it's very, very good. Both of these skills are very, very good. Now the problem with this particular trial, right, is that this particular trial is locked to Final Fantasy 11 units. So you can't really bring Abigail and Runda, and so we had to figure out some other ways to get general mitigation on our party. So there are a couple of options that include some trial rewards. One of them is Cradle of Horns. It's an active ability that gives the whole party 10% general mitigation, as well as a defense and spirit buff. It's relatively bad, but it is a free trial reward. You could go pick it up very, very easily. There's also a 4-star base unit, Orin, and he gives you Heaven's Guidance, which is a 40% general mitigation buff. But it's only single target and doesn't last very long, so that's not a very viable way to get general mitigation on your party. Probably the best way, I would say, is there's an STMR called the Saintly Castle, and it has a passive ability on it that puts general mitigation on your unit who's wearing it for an extremely long duration. It can be dispelled, but if you die and come back, the buff will reapply. And so like if you you put it in, we'll talk about how to make that work for you, but Saintly Castle is probably the most accessible form of general mitigation that you can get on a party without bringing a tank. So I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. If you go in, I'm going to just skip past this and just go into it. And here's just like my Final Fantasy 11 team, and I'm going to look at this Shantoto right here. Okay, if I go into her equipment, not this one, sorry, it's okay, we'll look at Aphmau. So Aphmau is wearing the Saintly Castle, right? And here it is. It's got defense and spirit 106, which is, you know, fairly decent stats for a defensive item. And it has this ability, imbued with the Sacred Castle's might. When you're wearing it at the start of battle or after being revived or one turn after Brave Shift, it automatically gives you this ability, imbued with the Sacred Castle's might, which is 30% active, or a 30% physical and damage reduction, which is general mitigation. Whenever it has both types, it's both, which is active until you're KO'd. It's not dispellable. So that's pretty cool. It's going to last forever until you die, but then when you come back, it's back. So you could very easily put that on a shift form that you're not using, and then it'll apply because buffs last on both turns or both forms. So like, for example, here's the other Shantoto I have. She's also wearing a Saintly Castle and an impenetrable pendant and a Vermilion flag, and has all these like automatic buffs and things like that, right? This one has like magic and spirit reduction resistance that are going to stay in place once I go to my other form. So like all these buffs are in place, right? Wisdom of Hess, Auto Faith, Saintly Castle, Impenetrable Pendant. Boom, I'm in my other form, and she's still going to have all of her buffs. It's pretty cool. Okay, if you've never seen that before, it's a very straightforward way to get nice buffs to last on units and things like that. So that's going to give, you know, 30% general mitigation to those units. So really, I've got 2 Saintly Castles. I probably should make some more, but yeah, I haven't had a need to do it yet, but you know, I probably should have some more. Okay. So what's an adventurer to do if they're being faced with really horrible fixed damage attacks and they can't bring a tank like Runda or Abigail? One, you know, give that Saintly Castle to your unit, ideally in a form that you start in but don't plan to use, like a base form, or sometimes you put it in the shift form and then like downshift to the base form, the one you're going to stay in the whole fight, and those buffs are going to carry over. 2, if it's an elemental based fixed damage attack, raise your elemental resistances. You know, in this case, Alexander does a lot of light based damage, so all of my units in the forms that they're going to stay in have 100% resistances. 100%, 100%, 110%. You know, this guy was not actually in the fight. That was for something else I was doing. But everybody's got 100% light resistances, so the, you know, you're not taking damage from the light attacks and the fixed damage attacks, just the fixed. So, you know, bring your resistances. Unfortunately, his Alexander's fixed damage is non-elemental, so you know, we got to deal with the general mitigation thing. And then 3 is just to increase your HP as much as possible. Since your defense and spirit don't really matter for fixed damage attacks, your HP does. If you just have a huge pool of HP and he's going to do 10,000 fixed damage every turn, okay, well, as long as I have 15,000, I'm never going to die from it, as long as I can heal my health back up. And if I've got 30% general mitigation, now that 10,000 damage fixed attack is only going to do 7,000 damage, and I'm in pretty good shape. I can probably heal that back pretty easily with skills or counters or just HP regen or something to recover that, you know, 7,000 HP, which is not that bad. You know, so really, Saintly Castle, elemental resistances, increase your HP, and that is going to help you with dealing with the fixed damage. And that's really all there is to it, because like I said, I'm going to put this back on the screen. Fixed damage ignores all this other good stuff. So like if you have Protect and Shelga, fixed damage doesn't care. If you have Cover or Mirage, fixed doesn't care. Fixed damage doesn't care. Evasion doesn't care. You know, it only is affected by general mitigation, elemental resistances. If you are doing fixed damage yourself as a player, it is impacted also by like chain modifiers and stuff like that, but bosses tend to not chain. Sometimes they do. It just kind of varies. You know, so the main 2 things we're dealing with is general mitigation and elemental resistance when we're talking about incoming damage from bosses. And that's, you know, really it. So hopefully that's useful to you in terms of how you can deal with fixed damage attacks. If you've got a question that you want to see answered in next week's video, please let me know in the comments, either here in Facebook or on YouTube, and I'll do my best to try and answer them. If not, I'll be just kind of looking for questions that are coming up. We're talking about new mechanics as we know about them, and we'll try and do a video on that. But until then, be good to each other, take care, and I hope to see you in the next video, which should be Sunday night after the live stream. So hopefully you go to the live stream too, and I hope to see you in chat there. Until then, be good to each other and have a good night.